Welcome to CEO Conversations, the private practice podcast. I'm your host, Brandy Mabra. This is your one-stop shop to learn the business side of your practice on a deeper level. On this show, we empower you to own your CEO status to scale your practice for growth, sustainability, and profit. Listen in as we talk about how to market your practice to gain more visibility, hire, build, and engage your ride or die dream team, create streamlined operations, and make financial decisions as a CEO. It's time to show up as a confident leader to create a practice and life you love. Let's get started. Hello. Welcome to another episode of CEO Conversations, the private practice podcast. It is Brandy. Yes. I'm so excited to be here with you today. And today's CEO conversation is all about hiring. So if you are getting ready to hire in your practice, or you think that you're ready to hire in your practice, or maybe you're just an OG when it comes to hiring, this episode is for you because we are going to make sure that you are not hiring unnecessarily, or that you're putting your profit at risk by hiring, and to always make sure you're set up for success. So let's go ahead and dive into today's topic, hiring, all about hiring. So we're going to talk through the good, the bad, and the ugly of hiring. So the reason why I'm diving into this conversation, because one of the main questions I get, because I work with, practice owners and their teams, and I've hired hundreds of people at this point in time. How do I know when I'm ready to hire? Or what's the best hire? Or should I hire a 1099 contractor? Or should I hire a W-2 employee? What do you think? Should I pay this person amount of money? Should we do flat fee? Should we do split fee? Should we incentivize our team members? Should we do profit sharing? Should we, have this in our contract? Should we not have this in our contract? Should they work this schedule? Should they work this many hours? Like, what do they do? What do they do? What do I do? Should I hire an admin person? Should I hire a provider? All of those things. So if you are in that space, sit tight, buckle up, and get ready for this ride, because I'm going to give you a masterclass on hiring, from best practices, making sure that you are set up for success. And then, of course, I'm going to reference a couple of episodes. So prerequisites or connection episodes for this are two of them. There is podcast episode number 11, which is asking the question if your team is an asset or a liability. So if you have already hired and you're getting ready to hire again, I would love for you to go back and listen to that episode. The second episode that I would love for you to go back and listen to is your team understaffed or underskilled? So a lot of times when we're talking about hiring, there is a time to hire and a time to maybe sit tight. So one of the things I love is to hire slow. I never rush people to hire, ever. If there is a mindset thing that's happening where they're coming from a place of scarcity, I might push them over the edge lovingly, but I'm not going to push them to hire like right away. We're going to go through a process of what I call an approval process and a justification process. So this approval process came from years of experience that I have. So for those of you who do not know, maybe this is your first time listening, I have almost 2 decades worth of business experience. My only focus is the business side of your practice, to make sure that the money's right, that you're leveraging your team, that operations are streamlined and efficient, and that you are set up for success. There's nothing that hurts my heart more than when I hear owners who are losing money or having to shut down their business or aren't profitable or working way too many hours, or they're burned out, or they want to shut it down, or they want to sell their practice for $1, all because of what happens in this team space. And there are good things about teams. There are bad things about teams, but it truly comes down to being strategic and intentional and making sure that the right people are in the right seats on the bus. So when you do that, and you have your ride or die dream team, which is an engaged team, a team who has buy-in for your mission and vision, a team who wants to help you build a practice, a team who wants to see you do well as an owner, it's magical. A lot of times when we get frustrated about teams, it's because we don't have those right people. And so much energy goes out into maybe a couple of bad apples, and that feels like it's the whole team. My whole team sucks, and really it's just one or two people. So I'm here to help you with all of this. And that is what today's episode is all about. But I want you to go back and listen to those 2 episodes. So again, that's episode 11 and episode 18, for you to kind of get a little bit more additional information as we dive into this, right? Okay, so let's talk about hiring. And let's talk about this approval process. So, this approval process I learned early on in my career because whenever I wanted to hire someone new or if I needed to replace a position, it had to be approved. This is a really great process for you to implement on your own because you might be thinking, like, oh, I'm the owner. I don't have to approve a process, but you should. And you would want to go through this process because, again, like I said, a lot of people hire unnecessarily or they hire and now they're struggling to make payroll. And so, if you go through this approval process and you sit down and you actually think, am I ready to hire? And you go through this format, you're going to save yourself a lot of time and money by getting the clarity that you need before you even take the leap. So, with the approval process, we used to have to justify the position. Justifying the position meant we had to tell them exactly what this person was going to do, why we felt that they needed them, who was on our team that maybe didn't have the skill set or the strength that we needed. Did we go through the process that I actually talk about in episode 11 and 18 about, like, have we gone through the process of thinking about other members on our team that maybe could absorb some of this work before we even hired? At the time, I'll be honest, at the time, I didn't really understand why we were doing this. It felt more of like, I need to get this team member in. I'm desperate. Like, I don't want to go through this approval process. And then when I was working for like large corporate practices, oh my gosh, sometimes that approval process would take a week or two. But fast forward, all the years later and hundreds of people hired, it's something that I do now in my business, and it's something that I actually walk through my clients with to make sure that the positions that they are hiring for make sense, right? And so again, it sounds fancy, it's an approval process, but it's really, when I talk about it, I'm like, okay, we're going to get some clarity for who you're hiring and why you need to hire them. But really, it's an approval process, it's a justification process. The other thing I like about this process is when you start to hire leadership team members, now they're going to come to you saying, hey, I really think we probably need to hire this person, or hey, I'm overwhelmed, or hey, and so putting them through this process is going to be important. So not only should you have an approval process for yourself as the owner, you need to develop this process so that way when you get to a place of hiring leadership team members, they now have a lead approval process that they can follow in order to bring to you to make sure that it makes sense for that next hire that they would like to hire, right? Because you remember, where you're at today is not where you're going to be at tomorrow. Your practice is growing, it is scaling. I know for the folks who listen to this podcast, you have big goals and dreams when it comes to your practice. And so a lot of the things that you're doing today, you are developing for tomorrow too. And this is one of those processes. So it's an approval process. So, justification of the position, we're going to start there first. Justification for a position always starts with job description. If no one on your team has a job description, I want you to start there. Because whenever you are hiring for a position, you should already have a job description that's been written out. If you do not have a job description and you hire, you're doing yourself a disservice. You're also doing your budget a disservice as well. So, having a job description, a well thought out job description. Now, inside a private practice CEO, there's a lot of templates. Even with Chat GPT, you can now create job descriptions on there. So there's no reason today why you should not have a job description. Like, it's too accessible, it's too easy. There's templates everywhere. But part of the job description starts with having the template, and then for you to do the work to know, what am I envisioning truly for this position? Like, what does this look like inside of my practice? And this all goes part of the justification. If you were hiring for the first time, this job description is probably going to be based on a lot of the work that you were doing as the owner, especially if it's your first couple of hires, making sure that you understand who your first hire needs to be. I would say when you were starting to grow a practice, your first hire should always be an admin. Especially, but this is when you're full and busy. If you are not full and busy, you're concentrating on getting yourself full and busy. But when you get to a place of hiring, it's an admin person that you're going to hire in order to take some of the in the weeds admin work off of your plate. After you hire that first admin, your second hire will be a provider. Sometimes people do it backwards. They will hire a second provider, a third provider, a fourth provider, and they never hire an admin. So now you have revenue generating bodies inside of your practice doing admin work, which is a waste of everybody's time. So you're literally leaving money on the table when you don't hire an admin. For the folks who are not new to this and who are in a place of, again, I am an OG when it comes to hiring. This is now my 10th hire, or, I have multiple providers. Then this process is going to be really give you clarity that you need for your practice, because you need to justify why you need to replace a position or why you need to bring on someone new, because you have already working bodies inside of your practice who can maybe absorb some of this work. So, when you're thinking about the justification process, you're looking for a couple of things. You're looking for themes of work. So, a really great example of this is when you hire someone, like going back to that admin person, and maybe they're doing a hodgepodge of everything, right? So, they're doing a little bit of marketing activities, they might be doing billing, they're collecting money, they're sending invoices, they're scheduling people, they're helping with the phone, they're answering emails, they're kind of your go to person for all the admin stuff. At some point in time, as the practice continues to grow, there's going to be more themes that develop for what that person needs to do specifically. So when you're thinking about like a front desk admin person, that person is doing things like check in, check out, collecting copays, collecting outstanding balances, answering the phone, maybe some like data entry when it comes to billing, right? But then if billing starts to grow, as an example, now you're in a place where you need to hire a dedicated biller. That would be a theme that would start to develop within that position. Another one would be like marketing, right? So a lot of times admin folks inside of practices, they're helping with some of the marketing activities. And eventually what happens is they start to get too busy because they're handling all the influx of patients and clients and phones and emails and collecting money and trying to do all those things, that the marketing piece kind of goes to the wayside. So that is a sign where you need to maybe start to look at, do I need to hire someone specifically to help with marketing? Right? So whether if it's community outreach, whether if it's, posting on social media, or if it's making connections for your referral network, or if it's pitching, or finding like collaborations and partnerships, like all of those things start to become a dedicated marketing position. So you're looking for themes. Is there any themes that are here that are developing where it's now time to hire a own separate person to do the specific business activity? So again, billing and marketing are the two positions. Within a clinical position, so like for providers, you start to recognize maybe they're taking on some additional work when it comes to training providers. Maybe they're taking on additional work when it comes to helping develop policy and procedures. And so you start to identify like a potential clinical lead or a potential clinical director or a clinical manager, in order to see like there's some leadership themes that are happening within this position, right? And so that's a telltale sign that maybe it's time for you to start to think about that. But there's a trick to it. There's a trick to it. Sometimes the budget isn't where you need it to be. And so this is the other part of the justification process. So this is the second part. So there's the themes and the job description and getting very clear on what's happening within this particular position. And do I need to maybe think about some different positions I need to hire for compared to just blindly replacing this position? And do I have the budget for it? A lot of folks, it surprises me. They will hire and they never look at the budget. You have to look at the budget. And even if you're stepping into a place of, hey, I know I'm hiring a little bit early, but I'm going to make sure that the practice performs this way in order to pay for this position. Like having that clarity is priceless. This is why having like a really strong financial partner, a really strong person where you can sit down and talk about, hey, I need to hire this person at this amount of money for this particular market, and they're going to help me generate more revenue based on what they're doing because they're doing X, Y, and Z. That's a different type of conversation compared to, well, I think I need to hire this person. My colleague hired this person, so I'm going to go ahead and hire this person too. The mistakes I see is where people hire, but they're not prepared for the payroll. So when it's time to come to pay the payroll, they're not prepared for it because they didn't make sure that the practice was performing the way that it needed to pay the payroll. So that budget piece is important. That's part of the justification process. How is this position going to help you make more money? And what are they going to do in order to make sure that you are in a place to make more money so you can pay for the position and you're not losing that profitability? Like that is critical, because the folks who end up hiring way too many people are usually not profitable. And I always like to ask the question because there's a lot of people who will go through and say, oh, I'm seven figures. Oh, I'm multi-million. Oh, I was able to sell my practice for all this money. What was the profitability? Like, what did that look like? Because it's important. It's important for you to not just hire, but how are you going to continue to remain profitable with money being left over to either invest or to save or to invest back into the business or to invest in you or to invest in other projects, like real estate, like all those things is tied to that profitability number because there's so much opportunity that you can do with a practice if you have money left over. So, budget, that's the second part of the justification process. The third part would be, again, it goes back to that justification when it comes to skill sets, strengths of your team. Are you leveraging your team? So, this is where the episodes 11 and 18 are going to be very helpful and going through and thinking about, are there additional skill sets and strengths that I need to bring into the practice? When you start to think about that, it's very powerful because there might be certain strengths and skill sets on your team that you're not leveraging, or there's certain skill sets and strengths or specialties that maybe you need to bring into the practice. So when we're thinking about this, we're thinking about our clients, we're thinking about our patients, we're thinking about how can we serve people in a deeper way. And that's going to allow for you, again, justify the position. So those are the kind of the three kind of things that you can think about when you're thinking about justifying the position. Again, job description, what was that current person doing, or what do I need for the person I'm going to hire to do? Are there any themes that developed, we're developing to allow for you to make a choice on, maybe I need to hire a dedicated person, so again, a dedicated marketer, a dedicated biller, or a dedicated just provider, or a dedicated leadership person. And it's all going to be telling in the job description, like looking for those themes. The second part is budget, making sure that you recognize what is it going to be, even if that is a replacement position, because you'll be used to paying for that position. However, maybe you shouldn't replace that person. And if you do replace that person, you have to justify the position from a budget standpoint. And how are you going to make sure that that person that you hire is paying for themselves, or you are putting the practice in a position to make more money? So with the position, that all comes down to financial. So that's the second part to think about. Then the third part would be, which is tied to the first part, are there any skill sets or strengths that I need as part of this position, or are there any skill sets and strengths that maybe I'm not leveraging my team, where that position can actually be absorbed into the team and I don't necessarily to hire? Or is it an opportunity for me to definitely serve our clients and patients in a deeper way in order to make more money or to bring in additional specialties into the practice? So that is justification of the position. Once you go through that justification process, now it's on to approval. So approval would be, am I going to post it? And what does that look like? So when you're posting the position, there's a couple of different things that you need to think about. How many hours? What's the price point? Which ties back into justification and the budget. Does it need to be a 1099 contractor or a W-2? I just got this question the other day about, do I hire a 1099 or a W-2? Know your labor laws. First and foremost, what does your state say that you can do? Because some states, again, are not equal when it comes to hiring a 1099 or a W-2. You might have to hire a W-2 and you might want to do a 1099. Here's my thought process. When it comes to 1099s, I am looking at a 1099 for testing a position or testing the market, especially in today's job market. One of the things I see, especially across specialties, because it's a very interesting dynamic with working with different types of providers and different type of specialties or different types of disciplinaries that they bring. Everyone thinks that what's happening specifically in my specialty is only my specialty, especially when it comes to the business side. The job market is hard for everybody. It does not matter. It is hard. There are certain positions, especially when it comes to credentialed positions, that are just hard to find. When you test the market, you're able to kind of see who's out there. What does that look like? How many positions are out there? asking for the same type of position. It just allows for you to see, because when we're thinking about hiring, it's a marketing, you have to implement a marketing strategy. I'm not going to dive into like the marketing strategy for your practice hiring, for hiring for your practice. That's probably a whole other episode. I probably need to write that down actually as I'm talking about it. But you have to implement a marketing strategy. Instead of looking for clients and patients, you're now looking for candidates. So when you post a position as a 1099, it allows for you to kind of see who's out there, who's kind of fishing. You can also post it as a W-2. I do recommend posting them separate. So a lot of times when I see positions, I'll see them as 1099, part-time, full-time, contractor. And I get it because you're trying to save money, but sometimes that's hurting you compared to if you hire a 1099 contractor, post that as its own separate position, and then post a W-2 position as a W-2 position. So that way you're able to, again, test the market. Whenever I'm unsure, so after I've gone through my justification process, as after I'm going through like my approval process, I've decided to move forward with posting a position. If I'm still kind of on the fence, I'm always going to post a 1099. Again, kind of see what's out there. There's not really a whole lot of commitment when it comes to a 1099. And a W-2 is more buy-in. More, that's a heavier lift. You have to pay taxes for those folks. You have to make sure their email is paid for. You have to make sure that they are engaged, job description, policy and procedures. If you let them go, you could be on the hook for a lawsuit or unemployment. So there's a heavier lift with W-2s. So you can post a position to test the market. If you're trying to test a certain position, so let's say you're trying to start maybe a new specialty inside of your practice, do it as a 1099, do it as a contractor. And that way you're able to see, is it working? Is it not working? What do I need to do to change it up? Like all of those things is going to allow for you to kind of see where you're at without being on the hook for like this long-term commitment, like with a W-2. The other thing is transitioning from W-2 to a 1099 or from a 1099 to a W-2. So everyone thinks, because most times it's true, with a W-2, the mindset is different. That a W-2 is going to be more engaged, that they're going to help you with certain projects, that they're here for the long term. And sometimes that's not true. Sometimes you will hire a W-2 and they have the mindset of a contractor. So you have to have the right W-2. I want to say that. Like you have to have the right W-2. Just because somebody is labeled as a W-2 as an employee in your practice does not mean that they're committed, like by any means. Sometimes you'll have, and in my experience, I've hired a 1099 contractor and they've been more committed than some of my W-2s. So I want to make sure that you understand that. All folks are not equal. It comes down to the person's character, them being very clear on what they want in life, what they want from their career, where their boundaries are. Like all of that factors in when you're thinking about a person, whether they are a W-2 employee or a 1099 contractor. Now, if you have a W-2 employee who is kind of half in, half out, I'll use a provider as an example. They're not filling. They may be, their quota is month after month. They're not full. You've talked to them about trying to get their schedule full. They're waiting on you to get their schedule full. They're not willing to do anything to get their schedule full. They're just putting it all on you. And they're a W-2. They're probably not a good fit. So, in the clients that I work with, if their state laws allow, let me make sure I say that, if their state laws allow, we are having conversations to transition that person from a W-2 to a 1099. The reason why is because, again, if you need to write them up, if you need to get rid of them, if you need to retrain them, it's a long process compared to if you're just having a very honest conversation about, listen, you're not doing what this position requires. You don't seem bought in as what you need, as what you should be. You can transition them over to a 1099, and that's going to save you money when it comes to taxes. It's going to save you energy, which is another form of money in my mind. Like all the energy, like you could use that energy and go find a really great collaboration that would help you make more money, help you make more money. But instead, you're putting all this energy into a person who necessarily doesn't want to be there. Like that's tiresome. So you'll save more money by having that person as a 1099, and it allows for you to focus truly on the W-2s who are engaged. The flip side of this is if you have a 1099 contractor who keeps saying like, oh, I'd love to be full-time. Oh, I'd love to be full-time. Have that conversation. But again, it goes back to budget, making sure that you're doing the work in order to get them filled, that they're doing the work in order to help get them filled. Like all of that is important when it comes to like the 1099 W-2 conversation. The other thing is if you're unsure, you can always, and your state requires you to hire only W-2s, you can do a W-2 part-time. A W-2 part-time person usually has the same mindset as a 1099 contractor. They usually are part-time bought in. They usually have some type of other more pressing opportunity that they're or focus that they're trying to fit in, but they need to work. So having just a very honest conversation about, again, when it comes to their growth, where are they projecting for their career to go? Where do they want to be? What do they want to be when they grow up? All those things start to factor into the 1099 W-2 conversation. Again, I cannot say this enough. Just because someone's a W-2 inside of your practice does not mean that they're engaged or that they're bought into anything. Just because somebody is a 1099 contractor doesn't mean that they're not necessarily bought in. They're less bought in than maybe the W-2, but the categories alone mean nothing. That's just more or less a way for the IRS to know, hey, who are you paying taxes for? And hey, who needs to pay their own taxes? Hey, who actually works for a company? And hey, who maybe has their own entity that they have? Like that's more IRS. When it comes to people are dynamic. So I'm always going to ask the question, who's engaged? Who wants to be part of your practice? Who actually shows that they want to see something great from the practice? Those are the folks where all of your energy goes into. And those are the people who you have deeper conversations with, And if they are contractors, those are the people that you're having conversations about, hey, do you want to be a W-2? And if not, then you're still working with them to keep them engaged because you would love to have them as part of the practice. There are a few, actually, every practice I've worked in or have been a part of, there's always been some like contractors that are just amazing. And I was able to give them extra projects and have them to be even like ambassadors over things because they wanted to do it. The biggest thing about contractors, they have the right to say yes or no, but they were just as engaged. They just didn't want to work full time for a company. And that's okay. That is okay. So that's my stint on W-2. So when you're thinking about posting the position, if you're trying to test it, you can always test it that way. Part of that justification process, you should have a good understanding. This is probably going to be a 1099 or this is going to be a W-2. Also thinking about the schedule, how many hours do they need to work? That goes back into thinking about the job description. How many hours is this going to require? Just because you've hired a full-time person, if that full-time person has transitioned out, it doesn't mean that you have to hire another full-time person. And that's why looking at the budget is so powerful. So once you post the position, once you create your marketing strategy for hiring, now it's time to do due diligence for the position. So you're going to go through your interview process. You're going to ask, very detailed steps. You're going to incorporate peer interviews. You're going to incorporate maybe a personality assessment or a talent assessment to get a good feel for who am I bringing into the practice. Is there anything that is missing when it comes to this person? And here is where the caveat comes in. If you do not find anybody, do not hire them. Don't do it. I would rather for you to sit tight and not hire that person than to hire somebody and have to try to get them out later. So be picky. Like people are not picky enough. Like your practice is amazing. You're doing great work in the world. Be picky. You deserve to be picky. Talk to their prior employers. Force the conversation of references. Do the background check. Have deep conversations about what are they going to bring. Have them do assignments before that you even hire them. It is okay for you to say, hey, I need for you to show up to this interview with X, Y, and Z. So that way you can make a good judgment on whether or not you are going to hire them, especially as a small business. So take the time that you need to hire. And even if you're in a place of, okay, I'm stretched, my team is stretched, they still want you to be picky because if you give them, I've done this. Well, I have 5 interviews lined up today and I could hire any one of them and I could hire today. But if they are not a good fit and I hire them and they're going to make your life harder, they're going to call out, they're not going to do their work, they're going to make you do all the work, they're not going to be a good team player, do you still want me to hire them? And the answer was always no. The answer was always no, take your time. It's okay. We'll be okay. We'll be okay, Brandy. So because your team wants you to be picky. And then if you have leadership, that leadership team needs to be picky. They don't need to rush that decision either. So they need to justify to you, again, why is this person a good fit? You need to be in on that conversation with them. You need to be in on the interviews as well. So that way, again, turnover costs money. Turnover costs so much money. And so taking the time that you need during that process is important. And sometimes you just need to wait. Sometimes you just need to sit tight. Sometimes that position needs to be posted, taken back down, and reposted. Sometimes you're having conversations about, your colleagues. Hey, do you know anybody who's a good fit for this practice and brings these type of qualities and skills and skill sets and good culture fit, strengths, like all of that. Sometimes you are just waiting, talking to associations, waiting. Remember, it's marketing. So if you haven't fully implemented a marketing strategy for the hire and you're getting subpar quality folks, please wait. Just wait, because your life will be better if you just sit tight and you're actually more picky about who you're bringing into the practice. So, of course, once you find that person, now you're bringing them on, you're onboarding them, you're going through contract negotiations, potentially salary negotiations, all of it. And then you're off to the races. But the most important part of this, and the reason why I'm saying what to do before you hire in your practice, is because there's a lot of thought that has to go into these hires. Once you bring on a person, it's pretty standard, it's pretty normal. So I'm not going to dive into all of that because it's really the chunk of it is like if you do the due diligence before and you're doing the due diligence during the interview process, then onboarding is so much easier. So I love when people make good hires because when they get the person in the door, it's like a breath of fresh air. I mean, literally, especially if they've been put through the ringer with their team or if they've kind of been in the trenches of having somebody that they knew wasn't a good fit and maybe they sat on letting them go, or maybe they're kind of pushing them towards like finding a new job, or they're just sitting tight and being patient until they let them go. Because there's a lot of times where I work with clients, I will tell them, you need to let this person go. This person is draining your payroll. This person is not profitable. This position makes no sense. There's some folks who have hired all these people. They're so top heavy, and we're actually having to scale back their practice bit by bit, or having tougher conversations with people in order to get them to leave. Or we are literally having to have, again, that W-2 to 1099 contractor position. It is hard. It's so hard. Like once you get to a certain level to have to like pull back and to take off the layers in order to rebuild. So going through this process is priceless. Going through and having an approval process, a justification process for yourself is priceless. Because when you get the right person in the door, again, it's like a breath of fresh air. Your life is easier. The person is eager. The person's excited. Onboarding is easy, especially if you already have, training documented. You have your practice hub. You have policy and procedures in place. You have your checklists, for onboarding. All of it. It just flows. It just flows. And so now you're in for 90 days trying to make sure that that person's successful. But it's different. It is so different. And so it's really fun to watch the folks that we get to work with who actually hire and make a good hire because they took their time and they were picky, compared to the person who, they'll maybe kind of listen and then they hire and then we're kind of trying to fix it. So it's all fun and games in the world of team and leadership, but you can do it. You can do it. But just the main thing is be picky. There's 2 points I definitely want to get across. Be picky, be picky, be picky, and know your state labor laws. Know your laws. I mean, this is a global podcast at this point in time. So just know your labor laws. For those who are in the states, you can go to the Department of Labor for your particular state to learn about your labor laws. Make sure that you are going back and checking labor laws. Just because you checked your labor laws when you first hired and now it's a couple years later, labor laws change. They change every year. Sometimes they change in the middle of the year. Sometimes you need to have a policy. This is why having even a HR or a human resource partner is really powerful. A strong one, especially as the practice grows, because I know there's a lot of conversation about gusto and everything else too. And so they have like an HR caveat. But at the same time, as their practice gets bigger, you are going to have to start to think about, do I need maybe a more hands-on HR partner? So making sure that you are set up for success when it comes to the practice is important. So important, especially with this hiring piece. So, okay, I am off my soapbox today for hiring. I hope that this episode is helpful. Again, make sure that you go back and listen to episodes 11 and 18 because that is a really great match with this particular episode. So, between these 3 episodes, you're golden. Like, you will be able to analyze your team, leverage your team to its full capability, really step into, am I ready to hire? Should I hire? Should I wait to hold off because the profitability doesn't make sense? What to do in the meantime, taking your time, be picky, all the things. And of course, Private Practice CEO is here for you. If you need it, Private Practice CEO is my signature CEO school for private practice owners, and it is amazing. So it is a combination of teaching and learning and workshopping and coaching and consulting for the business side of your practice. We work with both you and the owner and your team and making sure that you're set up for success. There is amazing, luxurious experiences and retreats that we do. We travel. It is everything that you need in order to be successful in your business. So I just love it. I love it. I love it. I love how it's developing and forming and the amazing clients that we get to work with every single day. And there's a lot of wins. There's structural wins, there's money wins, there's hiring wins, there's I'm taking more time off wins. I am no longer feeling stressed and overwhelmed wins. I feel more secure as an owner wins because the community is so amazing. So if you need that type of support, definitely see the link in the show notes to apply because it's wonderful. It is wonderful. It is wonderful. The other thing too is if you could please, please, please make sure that you rate this podcast, share this podcast. The only way that this can even get out into the world in a bigger capacity is if you rate it, if you share it, and definitely, write, if you want to leave like a review, you can always do that too. So thank you so much for listening. I appreciate you, and I hope that you have a wonderful day. See you next time. Thanks for listening today. I hope you enjoyed the episode and it empowers you as the CEO of your practice. If you enjoyed the podcast, please make sure you subscribe, share the message, and leave a review. If you want more information and support in growing and scaling your practice, click the link in the show notes to take advantage of our free resources or apply to work with me directly. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.